I hope somehow my slides do not want to. Yeah, next one. So this is the session from the Estonian government's new design system. A couple years back, we already had a Estonian design system presenting here, but the saga continues, and I'm really intrigued to hear about it. I will introduce you guys again, but just for the people here, you're at the right session if this is the one you wanted to join. Let me see. And it's part of the Design Systems Week, so we also have a next session. I'm so sorry, my team slides do not want to switch. Yes, here we are. So it's part of the Design Systems Week. So there will also be one other English session tomorrow, but we'll come back to that at the end of this session. Okay, so I see there's already 32 of you here. I think it might be time to start. So I'm going to change again to the next slide. This session is being recorded for everybody with their camera on. Please know that you're in the recording. I love that you are, but just know. And the code of conduct applies. I think I can stop sharing my screen now and introduce the people here. We practiced before because these are 3 people from Estonia and I'm not that familiar with names. So let me try and introduce Siret, Kärolin, and Tõnis are here. And they will present Estonia design system for you. I will stop talking because they have a lot to tell and otherwise you just will be hearing me. So go ahead, guys.
Thank you very much, Elaine, for the introduction. And the names were perfect, actually. So the practice makes perfect. And that's rings true. But yeah, hi, I am Siret. And I am the product owner and manager of TEDI at Estonia's Health and Welfare Information System Center, that goes short for TEHIK, TEHIK. And well, I hope that your design week is off to a great start, and we're happy to be the first online presentation today. But since we don't have much time, and you hopefully will have a lot of questions at the end, I hope you all see the screen that Kärolin was just sharing.
Yes,
I will start.
we do.
Perfect. I will start with decoding what does TEDI stand for. It is short for Design System for the whole Estonia, but practically what's behind it is Estonian government, not literally the whole Estonia in a sense. But if we look a little deeper, then we see that one arrow, one way, leads to my organization, which is TEHIK, and second leads to other organizations, and they're both in public and in private sector. And how this whole symbiosis works is that TEHIK fulfills the task set by the government and manages TEDI as a central team, and other organizations make up the community part of this design system. And both are equally important, but they have different set of tasks and a different set of processes, which we're going to get to shortly as well. But to jump a little bit ahead, TEDI does consist of 2 integral parts at all times. And there is TEDI Ready part, which is managed by only the central team in TEHIK, and the community part, where everyone is welcome to contribute. But since TEHIK does not have in-house development competency and we have to outsource it, and that's why I have 2 more people with me here today, Tõnis and Kärolin from Bitweb Development Company. And since my voice resource is a bit scarce right now, I will give the floor to them actually, so they can show you what and how and why we have built TEDI as it is. And Tõnis can maybe start with opening up a little bit of the timeline and why it's a new design system in Estonia.
Hello, my name is Tõnis. Thank you for introduction, Siret. And as the question was raised before, TEDI is a new design system in Estonia, but it has an history. And the history is basically with the previous design system that was called VEERA. The first version of VEERA started at the beginning of 2018. Basically, it was very simple style guide. Even it was in the PDF format, so it was hard to name it the design system. But a couple of years later, new design system that was made in Figma components was released. It was 2020, and there was basically just Figma components, documentation, and the code was just HTML and CSS. But in the early 21, in TEDI's development projects, some of the developers realized that only HTML and CSS is not going to work. They needed React components. And we can call that basically the TEDI was born from that decision. But let's fast forward. The need of the centralized process was needed because one project ended and another project started, and it really grew. The component library really grew. At the same time, VEERA was developed even further. And they saw that TEDI made some great progress, and they took some facts and styles and information from there, and they released the new VEERA, but it still was only HTML and CSS. To come back to the TEDI, we got on board around here and realized that let's take the style guide of VEERA, but add the developer components as well. And so we called that, and we announced the TEDI. Later on, Angular components were released, and this year it was decided that VEERA won't be anymore the national design system, and they merged into the TEDI. So maybe now Kärolin can explain the process in the deeper level.
Yes, of course. Hi, I'm Kärolin. I'm the lead designer in TEDI team, and I'm going to walk you through this TEDI component lifecycle. And first thing for every component is a need. And a need for a component can be start from bi-weekly Teams meeting or from community components. As Siret was saying, we have a community as well. Or GitHub wishlist, which can be actually initiated by everyone. And also Slack discussions. So those are the places where the need can come up. And then our team decides if this need is going to become one of TEDI's library's component or not. And if we decide that we're going to take it into this TEDI design library, then the first step is to design the component. Here we have links as well. We can share the presentation later on, and you can actually see the Figma as well, because the Figma is open to everyone. But first thing is to design a Figma component, and Figma component has its own definition of done, which is actually a pretty long list of things we are checking if the component has and component is following. But here I brought out a few more important things. First of all, variables. So if we are creating Figma component, then we're creating also variables, and those variables are not going to stay only in Figma. They're going to go into the development. And actually, they're also they're using the same name as they're using in Figma. The structure is a bit different because Figma is using variables folders, but in CSS, the folder names becomes prefix in CSS variable name. And also another thing that variables are allowing us to do in Figma, we can add different modes. Right now we have every component has 2 modes, light and dark mode. That means that every variable has 2 values, light and dark value. So here you can see a button that's in dark mode and light mode. Also, we have here you can see color variables, but we also have sizes and other like numerical or dimensional variables. And those have 3 different modes: desktop, tablet, and mobile mode. And those modes are allowing us to add different sizes to component in different device sizes. Like our buttons can be smaller in desktop mode, but they're larger in mobile mode, so that people can click it more easily and the usability is better. So that's how those variables are helping us. And also all our components are also responsive. So if we're doing like table of contents in desktop mode, we also have to think about how's it going to display in tablet or mobile mode as well. And here you can see even typography is changing in desktop and in mobile mode. The same heading is automatically changed to smaller. And in Figma, we also are following web content accessibility guideline, like contrast, sizes, and all other visual design guidelines. And also we're doing usability testing, but only if needed. Every component doesn't need it, like statuses or like small components that are not interactive. We don't test usability with all those, but for example, mobile components like mobile tabs and steppers and table scrolls and interactions, we're testing those kind of components. And one important thing that Figma doesn't support, but we have invented our own statuses. So we're tracking 2 different level statuses. Every component has 3 status that shows if it's ready in Figma, if it's ready in React, or if it's ready in Angular development. And we also have variant level status. That means that if one button has different variations, then if the designer is using that variant in her or his prototype, then he or she can see from the properties if it's done or not in the development and in which language. So yeah, this is the most important TOD in Figma. And after it, this Figma component goes into design review, where other designer can also check if, I don't know, if the component works with long text, short text, if the variables and properties are named correctly, and everybody can understand what are the meaning of that, and how the component itself is named, and so on. So here's also a quick walkthrough how ready component is displayed in Figma. So here we have title and statuses at the top of the frame. Then we have links to other environments. We have tips and tricks section, which is meant for designers only in Figma. And then we have properties displayed. Every component have different properties like sizes, I don't know, colors, border radius, and so on. Light and dark modes, usage examples, and also release notes if we're gonna add some variant to component, or we're gonna make some bigger changes, then we're gonna track the changes underneath the component in the release notes. Then everybody can see what we have added there. And after this, Figma is released and Figma file version is updated. And Figma is released separately from development. So if Figma component is ready, then designers already can use them, and they can see from the statuses if it's developed or not. So they're like separated processes. But there's also a parallel process for documentation as well. Our documentation lives in Siret, and even Siret has a definition of done. So in Siret, we have 3 pages. Every component has 3 pages. First of all, they have a user manual. User manual shows mainly how to use the component, what variations do you have. We also have those like examples, how does it look like. Also, we have accessibility guidelines that shows what guidelines TEDI component has followed and what guidelines project itself has to follow, because TEDI can't guarantee all the accessibility, that it meets all the accessibility rules, because it depends on the project as well. And also 3rd page is content creation guideline. And this page is only if the component consists text. And documentation itself also has this documentation review. Somebody else is doing that, not the one who made the documentation. And then we're releasing the documentation separately as well. And then here, jumping back here, if the design is ready, then actually the designer is making the GitHub issue for development. And then development team gets notification that design is ready and they can start developing that. And I'm gonna give a word back to Tõnis.
Thank you for issue in GitHub for giving me the word. Yes, next step is development. As it's previously said that TEDI code base lives in GitHub. We have GitHub organization for the design system. There is all the source code and documentation needed for developers and wikis and some guidelines and migration stuff and etc. But of course, TEDI in GitHub is open source. It can be contributed from all over the world, basically. But as Siret said, that it contains 2 different parts. One is the TEDI Ready, that is developed from TEDI core team, and another part is the community. All of the code base in React and Angular, it's so that those components or those parts are separated in Storybook as well, like I'm seeing here, that TEDI Ready has its own structure of the components. It's layered logically and etc. And every component quality is guaranteed. The community part is a little bit more, how to say, Wild West. So what differs the community and TEDI Ready? Again, definition of done. It makes the crucial role of it. So the definition of done for TEDI Ready components defines the quality that the components need to have. Here is just some basic things that needs to be mentioned, but again, you can click it, the definition of done, and the wiki page has a large list of things that we need to do. So yeah, TEDI component, of course, is always unit tested. Visual regression is tested. We are using Chromatic for that. Responsiveness is developed and tested. Again, accessibility is implemented and tested. So, and of course, it is synced with Figma via the variables. In the community, on the other hand, we have just recommended definition of done. Because if the community wants to create a component, maybe someday the component will be in TEDI ready part, then it's much easier us to convert it to the TEDI ready. But this is a recommendation. It's not a rule. But again, how community can contribute. First of all, if something is done with the library, then the community wants to see how the new component looks like or what's going on. Then we have implemented this kind of feature in GitHub and with Storybook. So we don't have only one storybook. We have several storybooks. So if community creates new branch or new fork in GitHub, then all of the branches gets its own storybook automatically deployed. So you can see all the time what community is doing, and actually the same applies with the TEDI ready core team as well. Community can see what's in progress in our team. So it's very convenient way to see how development of the components and etc. Is done. So, but the process, if the component is developed, it needs to go through the code review. Then design review. So we include the designer as well. Designer can see the branch and can see the component, and it can compare to the Figma. So it's validated if it's developed as designer intended to. Then accessibility is reviewed, and if everything is okay, then component has in release candidate state. So what it basically means that every component or every change is ready to use when it's the quality is guaranteed and it's pushed to the repository or pushed to the NPM. So if the developer wants, it can follow the RC branch or RC versions. This means release candidate versions, and can use TEDI ready or TEDI design system as up to date as it can. But we are releasing TEDI ready system like in every month regularly. So what does it basically mean is that we just collect all the changes that has been done in previous month, and we say that now it is released, and we are giving the release notes that is helping other developers and other persons to see what have changed. So if you don't want to be up to date like daily basis, then you can be up to date like monthly basis. That's how we are releasing TEDI. So Siret, can you maybe give some introduction that what has been biggest challenges and lessons maybe?
Yeah, let me just go to the right place in my own file here. As with everything that needs to be built in a way that can be actually described as the airplane already in the air, when we were trying to put the pieces, attach the pieces to it, because everybody were already using the code base than the design. It has been a challenge, especially with the migration as the first little sticky here on the left. And it continues to be a challenge because when we first started out in our own building in Kivisikk, it was a big challenge. And now when we are going across the nation, it's going to be even bigger migration task. And we definitely need some help from outside of the building as well, even more than from Bitweb, but also maybe from somebody else who can help us with all the communication and the change, like enabling the change within all the projects. We're onboarding new teams almost every week, and it's already a pretty big crowd using TEDI now. And sometimes it is a bit scary, the task ahead, but we're still going. And of course, because we have such a big crowd, we always bump into this problem here. It's picking out what's important to build for everybody's needs. And then I jump to the second blue. That is, sometimes you have to make unpopular decisions and we can't please everyone at the same time. That is one of the reasons why we have kept the differentiation between community and ready components, because for community, everybody can pitch in, everybody can really just build their own necessary component and leave it there, and it never has to become part of ready code. It never has to become part of the core TEDI, but it's still there. Everybody can see it and everybody can use it. And I think our main goal when we started out with TEDI as a new product, because it used to be just for in-house use and it was named Design Nest, it became a whole new product just because we wanted it to be very open. That's why everything is open source, everything is linkable, everything is clickable, everything is usable, and most of our material, except the documentation, is also in English. So even if somebody from this this event today wants to, I don't know, participate in anything, then you can just easily join us in the Slack channel and participate and pitch in and maybe even build something. It's never, we never say no if there's good intentions behind that. Another big thing that has come up with more people on board is also the customization needs. Again, coming back to the blue, can't please everyone. We are trying to push it that since it's a government-wide design, not everybody needs to look different. It doesn't necessarily mean that we cannot have some of the personification tools used or illustrations for every building or every organization, but it doesn't necessarily mean that everybody has to have like a different color set for buttons or etc. So we're trying to be a little bit unpopular in that sense, to push through with the same kind of style guide for everybody. There are some of the exceptions we're already taking on board and trying to accommodate, but it has proved a big challenge to, and Kärolin is the one to, the one who has to do all the work when somebody wants to have a different set of colors, because it's a huge thing to change in Figma and insert in Figma. And here is the very good time to talk about Figma restrictions. Figma isn't the perfect tool. So one thing is for sure that when we are talking about all sorts of variations that can be used in Figma, there are plenty of restrictions that come with this. So Kärolin has to be really creative to make things work for somebody who wants to look different. Another thing that Figma is restricting us from is we cannot easily share our UI kit to everybody, like in Figma community, because this is just not allowed. Figma has this, but doesn't allow nobody else to use it except them. So everybody now is just joining one Figma file, and we are inviting everybody to build their project in one Figma enterprise space. And if you know, I mean, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about when I'm saying that the licenses are expensive for enterprise. So if you think now that we have a government house coming on board with like 16 projects, we're talking about 80 licenses. We're not just for one organization, and there are a lot of organizations that want the same kind of treatment. It's going to cost a lot for the government. How to cut that cost? This is again ways to try to find some workarounds. We haven't come up with very good solutions yet, but we're trying to like govern it somehow. I think also this it brings us here that to the pink one, that we have to think through when we make some ground decision, because we might not be able to back out from it anymore. So if we have taken ourselves this let's everybody gather together into the enterprise Figma, then we have to follow through it. And it's again a little tricky. And as Tõnis has written here, making something complex is easy, but making it simple is the real challenge. Is also why TEDI actually came to life, because before that, Design Nest was actually developed more like a developer-driven space than design-driven. Now it is as it's supposed to be. Design is leading, and everybody can follow through. And it doesn't matter if it's in React, if it's in Angular, or maybe someday it's going to be in some other platform like Vue or something else that's on the horizon. And well, what's the most important thing with everything is here in the center: communication, feedback, the constant talks. We meet every other week with front-end developers and with designers, technically face-to-face, because it's still not that big of a crowd, so we can still talk to people. And we onboard teams in team by team. We take them, sometimes we gather together a couple of more teams, but it's still very much hand-on, very personalized. We want to know what the needs of one particular organization is. Okay, but I see already questions coming in, so maybe we can start taking.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and I'm going to put on some pretty pictures of us as well, because we have had a lot of fun with TEDI team as well on the go. So it's not always only the hellfire raining on us.
Thank you so much. Very nice overview. I think indeed I recognize a lot of the same challenges, and also I think some of the solutions you're choosing with the community is also how we in the Netherlands are doing the NL design system approach. Very nice to see. Thank you so much. Let's see, there's some questions, so I'm going to read them out. Also for people watching this thing back later. Have you used or thought about using container queries instead of using traditional breakpoints?
That's very developer-specific question. We are constantly improving the code base of TEDI. I'm not the low-level developer to give the exact questions what they have come up with, but I'm sure that they have thinking along, but maybe not haven't had time to implement it yet. But I can ask them and get back to you. Thank you for the question.
Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to their answer. Do you have a sync between your Figma tokens and your code tokens?
Yes, we have. We are using couple of we have used couple of Figma plugins for getting the tokens synced, but on on the code side, we have also a script that translating the Figma plugin export to in the right way as well. Yes.
Nice. Then also we heard the troubles with all the Figma licenses. So Jeffrey is from the NL Design System core team as well, and we are looking into connected projects. So he is wondering, have you already, because it's quite a new feature, have you played around with connected projects already? Because that might be a solution.
Yes, I can answer for that. We have tested it, but it only actually allows you to connect Figma project with only one project outside of this organization. So if we're going to connect TEDI library with some project outside this organization, then that's it. You can't connect it with others anymore. So it's like only from one project to other project. So yeah, it's
There's still some
restricted.
restrictions there, right? Yeah. Yeah,
The
we're looking
solution is
into
there,
it
but
as well.
it's not enough for us. Yeah.
No, and then there's also a limit to the, so if you're using enterprise, I think your limit is 15 projects. And if I am hearing how many projects are entering the TEDI design system, that might not even be enough for you. So let's see. You are in a challenging situation with TEDI usage growing so rapidly. How do you balance onboarding new organizations personally versus developing onboarding documentation and so on?
Yeah. I'm sorry. The popularity really runs ahead of our project, so we have to catch up to it all the time. It is a lengthy process, and we are trying our best to still onboard personally, and the documentation fortunately is mostly already there from the previous times when we were onboarding our in-house projects. So now we're just scaling more. But before that, we also needed the documentation to onboard, but then it was just in-house. Now it's for the out-house projects. So luckily we had that. We have had to change it a little bit, of course, along the way. And that's how along the way the DoD list that Tõnis was talking about, we had to add one for the community as well, because it looked like it's going to aid us a lot when we are trying to finally make them TEDI ready components. Then they're not so much different from what we expect, and we don't have to put in so much work anymore as the last leg to bring it to TEDI ready library. So that's luckily what we had thought through as one of the first steps when we started just in the house.
Super nice. Last question, I think. What is your process for reviewing accessibility for components after development?
I can answer that. The review of the accessibility contains in several steps. First of all, there is an automated process to review the basic accessibility, but it's not enough. So there needs to be a human review as well. So what we are doing is so that the component is reviewed first of all in Storybook. It's reviewed in desktop, in mobile devices. Also, we are using two different voiceover programs. One is for the Mac voiceover, and the other is the JAWS, that's popular in the Windows environment. And another thing is to use the component outside of the Storybook as well, because testing in Storybook doesn't maybe give so good results. But we are using also one plugin for Storybook that you can see when you are seeing the component in Storybook. It shows the hints for the accessibilities as well. So if the component has some problems, the Storybook plugin will show it, or it shows it's all success. Then the next step would be to document the component, because in accessibility there are a lot of criteria that can't be tested only using one component. It can be tested when several components are developed in the application or in some page. And for that, we are giving the real application developers the guidelines, what they need to test their own. So we can say that one component follows these and these guidelines, but we can't test, I don't know, maybe the tab ordering or etc. So these kind of things are responsible for the application developer. I hope.
Very nice. Yeah, thank you so much. You're doing both the things that can be tested automatically, and then there's some manual testing, and that's all for the component, but you give guidelines as well to make sure that people using the component in context can also make sure they don't break the accessibility of their page because they don't use your component correctly.
Yes.
I think, yeah.
And also for those bi-weekly meetings, we are getting the feedback as well, and we're collecting the feedback. If the components are used in the applications, we can see the results and maybe enhance the components in that way as well.
Very nice. So thank you all so much. Thank you for the questions in the chat. Thank you for answering them. It was really nice, really fun to hear about Estonia's new design system that has quite extensive. I mean, it's both in Figma and in code, and you have the connection, and you're doing documentation. It's quite impressive. So thank you very much for sharing. I'm gonna share my screen for the people wanting to know what's up next in the Design Systems Week. So unfortunately, this is today's last session. We had a session planned for this afternoon, but unfortunately, the person giving this session, Ellen, is ill. So we're trying to see if we can schedule it for another point this week. We will keep you updated. But tomorrow there is, for the people speaking Dutch, there's quite a lot of sessions, namely 4. But for all the people here, I'm only going to highlight Helsinki Design System. Also a very nice design system with quite a lot of things to learn from. And they will also tell us more about that design system tomorrow at the end of the afternoon. I think that's all. So thank you all very much for listening and being here, and see you soon.
Thank you so much for having us, and thanks so much everybody for the support.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.